It's late on Sunday afternoon at Center Hill Lake in Tennessee. The sun is starting to set, the water is calm, and the weekend is finally winding down. And it was the kind of weekend that thousands wait for all year. It was Wakefest. So music was echoing across the water, boats were tied together, friends were just laughing, drinking, making all sorts of memories together. But later that afternoon, two fishermen who were staked out in a very quiet cove away from all of the noise, they spotted something floating in the water. It wasn't driftwood, it wasn't debris, it was a body. Hey everyone, welcome back to 10 to Life. I'm Annie Elise, and today we are reopening the case of Lauren Agee. Now at first, investigators called this a tragic accident, but almost immediately, doubts started surfacing. See, the campsite was perched on a very dangerous cliff. The timeline didn't add up. And the behavior of her friends, those closest to her, it raised some red flags that still haunt this case nearly 10 years later. Was this really just an accident? Or was something far more sinister covered up that night on Center Hill Lake? Let's get right into it. Lauren Agee was a 21-year-old sophomore in college. She was studying criminal science and really wanted to pursue a path and a career in, the mysterious field of criminal justice and true crime and everything that rolls into it. She was your typical 21-year-old, fun-loving, dancing, party, fun girl. All around had a bubbly personality and it just enjoyed being with her friends, enjoyed laughing, and was very outgoing. The weekend of July 24th, 2015, Lauren went up to Wakefest in Tennessee with her childhood friend named Hannah Palmer. Hannah was driving Lauren's car, and on the drive, they were taking selfies, they were having fun, listening to music, just really excited for the weekend ahead. Joining them that weekend was Hannah's boyfriend, Aaron Lilly, and his friend, Christopher Stout. Now, Lauren hadn't met Christopher before. This was going to be the first time they were meeting, but she was excited to hang out with all of them. It was going to be the four of them. They had some other friends that were going to Wakefest that they were going to meet up with, but that was the four of them who were going to stay at the same campsite and really be attached to each other for the weekend. Now, Lauren's mom, Sherry Smith, wasn't super excited about the idea of Lauren going to Wakefest just because, again, it can be a little dangerous. People are operating boats, you're swimming, you're in the water, there's lots and lots of alcohol. So she wasn't super thrilled about it, but ultimately she said, Lauren's an adult, she can make her own decisions. Plus, Lauren originally had even planned to come back just one day later because she had plans to go with her boyfriend Chase to a party that evening. So she was only going to go for, a day and a half, and then return home, and it would all be fine. However, Lauren never went to that party with her boyfriend Chase. Lauren ended up going to the lake, and she never returned. After getting to the lake, the four friends end up setting up their campsite, and they set up this campsite on a cliff, a literal cliff. One side of this cliff had a 30-foot drop and the other side of the cliff had a 90-foot drop. Now, you could only get to this cliff by boat or canoe. You couldn't drive there. That's how challenging it was. And in a video that Lauren had even taken to show her friends, you can hear Hannah in the background saying, "Oh, we're going to a death trap."
In a canoe. It's a cliff on both sides. Oh my gosh, this is crazy.
We're going into a death trap.
I mean, this huge cliff, and that's where they decided to camp. Now, call me crazy, and I'm not one that claims to be a wilderness person by any means. I don't love the great outdoors. First of all, it'd be hard pressed to find me camping in a tent in general, no less on a cliff. But these kids wanted to do it. They were going there for the fun weekend and they wanted to camp on this cliff. So the plan was for Hannah and her boyfriend Aaron to camp inside this tent, and then Chris and Lauren were going to sleep in the hammocks at this campsite. Now, first of all, and I have a couple issues here. First of all, a hammock on a cliff. A tent on a cliff is one thing. A hammock on a cliff is entirely different. I mean, you could not pay me enough to do that. That sounds extremely scary. What was weird about this too is Lauren has a boyfriend, so I'm not sure why she was sharing a hammock with Chris, especially because it was the first time they even were getting to know each other. But it could have just been a simple fact of these were the lodging circumstances. They didn't have an extra tent. It was going to be platonic. Who really cares? So in any event, Hannah and Aaron were going to stay in the tent, and then Chris and Lauren were going to stay in the hammocks on this cliff. Well, the next day, on July 25th, around 10 or 11 p.m., Lauren texts her friend Jade saying that she's not having a good time and that she wanted Jade to come and pick her up. Now, something that stuck with me ever since I first came across this case was this text message. It really bothered me that I didn't know more about it. I mean, how serious was that message? Was it just casual frustration, or was it something urgent? Because I know in my own life, there are certain people where if they text me that, I'm in the car immediately. But I also know others where it might not feel as pressing. So I did some digging, and I found a first-hand account from none other than Jade herself, where she's talking about this exact text. She's on a podcast called Without Warning. And we'll talk more about the host, private investigator Sheila Wysocki, and the role that she really played in this case later on. But for now, I want to let you know that we will be putting in some clips from her podcast throughout this episode. They really help fill in the gaps and give more important context as to what happened. And if you want a full deep dive into Lauren's story, Sheila actually dedicated an entire season of her podcast to it, so I will link it in the show notes for you. But for now, here's Jade describing that message from Lauren.
She texted me, and it was really brief, but she just asked if I could come get her. She said she wasn't having a good time. I was like, is there any way that's possible for you to come get me? And it was probably 10, maybe almost 11 o'clock when she texted me that. I tried to call her multiple times, and she didn't have good service out there, so I couldn't get the call to go through. So I told her I would have to let her know if I could come get her or not, with it being so late and me not knowing where I'm going.
So based on that clip, it doesn't sound like the message came across as extremely urgent to Jade, though it definitely was important. As Lauren is waiting to hear back from Jade, she's at the bar with Hannah, her boyfriend Aaron, and his friend Chris. And while at the bar, Lauren runs into a friend of hers named Evan. They get to talking, and she tells Evan that she's staying at a nearby cabin, yet she wasn't staying at a cabin, she was camping in that hammock. So why she told Evan she was staying in a cabin, who knows? Maybe she was embarrassed. Maybe she didn't want to say that they were camping or roughing it. But she says, yeah, we're staying in a nearby cabin. At approximately 2 a.m., Lauren was seen leaving the bar with Hannah, Aaron, and Chris. Officer Yarchuk was an off-duty cop who also happened to be working as a security guard for Wakefest weekend. He was inside that bar and spotted Lauren as she was leaving with her group of friends as last call concluded. But what had happened to that earlier text that Lauren had sent Jade, where she was saying she wasn't having a good time? Now she's leaving with her friends. Is it just because she's going back to the campsite and wants to go to sleep? Was she still not having a good time with them? Was there maybe an argument or a rift or something going on between her and her friends? We're going to keep digging into those questions. But first, I want to share a detail that I think is important. And it comes from Evan, the same friend that Lauren told that she was staying in a cabin instead of a hammock. In one of his interviews with investigators, he answered what I think is a crucial question. This clip comes from Sheila's podcast, Without Warning.
Can you start what Lauren's condition was leaving the bar that Saturday night?
She had a few beers, but she was, in my opinion, not drunk.
Okay.
She, of course, had a few, but she was definitely not publicly intoxicated.
Not impaired?
Yes.
Now keep in mind, Sheila confirmed that Evan and Lauren had been friends for quite a while, and from everything we know, he had nothing to gain or lose by being honest about what he saw that night. Now the detail that he gives, that Lauren didn't appear drunk when she left the bar, it might sound small, but I think it's actually pretty significant. So just keep that in the back of your mind as we move forward in this episode. Ryan Melanson, an off-duty officer, was the first on that crime scene with Officer Yarchuk. They followed the two fishermen out to that cove to the scene of this horrible crime. And within minutes of Lauren's body being found in that secluded cove, Aaron and Chris were there, and they were paddling towards Lauren's body, shouting that their friend was missing and asking if that was a woman's body. Okay, be honest. How many of you are lying awake at night staring at the ceiling? Maybe even doing it right now because you can't sleep, and so now you're like, I need to watch something because I'm just staring at the ceiling. Let me turn on my little true crime BFF Annie. I get it. I used to be up for hours, tossing and turning or waking up 3 or 4 times a night, just Running on 4 hours of sleep was kind of like my norm. It was my usual. And by morning, I was groggy, cranky, running on caffeine. I needed to like crack open a Diet Coke way too early than I should be doing. And it was a nightmare. But that's when I found Beam Dream. It is this luxurious, all-natural sleep powder that you mix into hot water or milk, either choice, and you do it before bed. So it's like this sweet little cup of dessert, like this sweet treat before bed. It's packed with ingredients like magnesium, reishi, L-theanine, and all these things that work together to just calm your body, to ease restlessness, and to help you sleep deeper and better. In fact, Dream has already supported over 18.5 million nights of sleep. And the results speak for themselves. 89% said that it reduced their nighttime restlessness, 82% felt that their mental state improved at night, and 79% said that they got a deeper sleep. And for me, the difference was huge. I went from lying awake at night staring at the ceiling to actually feeling well rested when I woke up. Not to mention falling asleep in literally 20 minutes. Honestly, it has changed my whole nighttime routine, especially because I'm someone who does like something sweet before bed. So this is like the perfect substitute where I know I'm going to get like a good payoff for it rather than just like, shoving like a Snickers bar in my face. And it's changed my whole nighttime routine and even my mornings. I just have more energy. I'm not dragging. I'm not moody. It's the best. And I've talked with you about Beam Dream before, and so many of you have tried it and told me how much you love it as well. So you can get exclusive early access to Beam's Black Friday sale with up to 50% off for a limited time. Just click my link and use code 10TOLIFE at checkout. This is Beam's biggest sale of the year and the best deal that I've ever shared, so definitely do not miss out. Again, click the link and use my code to get the best sleep of your life, starting for just $1.08 a night. Don't miss this deal, because once Black Friday hits, it is gone. So go to my link and use code 10TOLIFE at checkout for 50% off for a limited time, and sweet dreams. The two officers noted that Chris and Aaron were acting extremely different. They reportedly seemed extremely nervous and also had no sympathy or actual concern for that young woman and if it was in fact Lauren. And it seems very calculated that they would go straight towards the scene where these officers are, where these fishermen just found this body at the exact same moment when the officers had shown up. Officer Melanson said that when they went up the cliff with Aaron and then returned down, Aaron had an entirely different look and different demeanor. And he says that by the time they got down the cliff, Aaron's face had changed so much and he had a look on him that looked as though he was not going to get caught. So the officers bring the boys into their pontoon boat because they want to start questioning them and start figuring out who this girl was, what could have happened to their friend, and how they got to this point. So Officer Melanson starts with Chris, and he really starts getting Chris just talking about his life. Now what's really weird is Chris just kind of blurts out that for work, he works with amputated body parts. Which, okay, if that's what you do for work, fine, but it seems kind of an odd thing to just directly say and in such kind of a cavalier way when you are also discussing a deceased body that was floating nearby recently that happens to be your friend. So he just kind of blurts that out. Chris also tells Officer Melanson that he and Lauren had sex. Now, why would you, it's a weird thing to say in itself when you're having questions about who this woman is, your friend, and you're talking about life and all these things. Like, why do you need to say that, first of all, unless you're trying to explain why your DNA may turn up at a possible crime scene or on a possible victim? Why else would you just kind of blurt that out and say that when you are talking to the officers? Just a very personal thing to say. Anytime Chris would start to go into deep conversation with the officer, Aaron would just look at him and hit him and tell him to shut up. At one point, Chris was looking at Officer Melanson and looking at the firearm that he had on his hip. And when Officer Melanson asked Chris, like, hey, what are you looking at over there? Chris said to him, I'm thinking about how I'm going to get that gun off your hip and get off this boat. Officer Melanson said, well, sorry, that's not going to happen. And then apparently 10 minutes later, Chris said that again to him. So Chris wanted off that boat. He was telling the officer, which why would you ever tell the officer this? He was telling the officer that he was trying to think of how he was going to get his firearm to get himself off the boat. Not really something an innocent person necessarily would say. Was he worried that he was going to be questioned and then taken into custody? Was he feeling some sort of guilt for what happened and that's why he wanted the firearm and wanted to get off the boat? It's just not statements or behavior, in my opinion, that an innocent person would necessarily have. So Chris and Aaron end up giving their official statements to the officers. And just a quick reminder, if you're listening to the podcast, these episodes are also on YouTube. So if you would like to see the visuals like these written statements, you can definitely watch them there. We'll start with Chris's statement, and you can see here that he says, "Last night, the girl came to our campsite for a few minutes saying she was going back to her ex-boyfriend. Hung out very shortly, then I fell asleep and woke up and she was gone." It looks like here it says back to her ex this morning, and he said she came back after we left and was trying to get with me the night after we had seen her at the campsite. Said she was trying to keep something out with him in front of his new girlfriend. Then he walked away. So a couple of things with this, first of all. The statement is very kind of just like foggy and weird and doesn't seem like a real clear indication of what took place that night or earlier that morning. But also, he's not referring to Lauren by name. He's referring to her as the girl, and she, not ever attaching a personal name to her. And he knew her name. He was sharing a hammock with her. Even though he only met her for the first time, he knew her name. So to be giving a statement being like the girl, to me, feels like maybe disassociation to some degree. But what do you think? And then Aaron gives his statement. And here he says, "Lauren I saw last when we were coming back from the bar with our group. She had cried about her ex-boyfriend, who I saw the next morning, and had said she tried to make a move on him, and he refused and said he last saw her going to the houseboat and was last seen by me, I would say around midnight, before Hannah and I got into bed in our tent at the campsite." So he's saying that night at the bar when Lauren was, apparently not having a good time texting her friend Jade, that she was crying over her ex-boyfriend because he was there with another girl, and that she tried to make a move on him and he refused. And then she decided to kind of wander off to the houseboat on her own. And then he went to bed with Hannah. But then Chris says that when he went to sleep, he and Lauren were both in that hammock together. And that Lauren had mentioned going to see her ex-boyfriend, but that when he fell asleep, she was still in the hammock next to him. But he says that he didn't feel her leave the hammock. He didn't feel her get out of it, but that at some point she must have gotten out. However, if anybody is familiar out there with these ENO hammocks, you will 100% feel if somebody is getting in or out of that hammock. It is very, very sensitive. And so you would absolutely, in my opinion, you would absolutely feel if somebody was either getting out of the hammock or if somebody was climbing on it. And they are so sensitive, in fact, that you oftentimes feel like you're going to completely just flip over or start spinning. It kind of it's a netting that kind of cocoons around you a little bit. And so you don't fall out while it's cocooned around you. But if somebody gets in, they have to kind of peel it back on either side to then crawl in. So you would absolutely feel it. So if she did, in fact, get out of that hammock at any point by herself, it's hard to believe that he didn't feel it. At least in my opinion, it's very hard to believe. So then the officers, of course, decide they need to also talk to Hannah. They need to talk to Lauren's friend because she was one of the last known people to be with Lauren at that bar and at the campsite. So they go and speak with Hannah. Hannah says that she woke up and immediately asked Chris where Lauren was. Chris tells her that she must have gotten up a while ago but didn't feel her get out. And Hannah was apparently immediately concerned because she said that Lauren left her flip-flops, her purse, and her cell phone. So if she were going off somewhere or going to meet someone, she would have brought those things with her. Now, Officer Yarchuk is the one who spoke with Hannah right after Lauren's body was found, and he describes Hannah's demeanor as being extremely flustered, but not in a devastated way. So back when we first covered this case, we didn't have access to this clip that I'm about to play for you. But thanks to private investigator Sheila Wysocki and her work on Lauren's case, we now do have it. And this is an audio recording from Officer Yarchuk's cell phone. It was captured right around the moment that Lauren's body was found and as he spoke with Hannah. And just bear with me because some of this might be hard to make out in the beginning, especially if you're listening to the audio-only version of this episode, but I want you to listen closely because this clip sheds light on Hannah's demeanor just moments after Lauren's body was found.
How many of y'all slept up there last night?
4 of us.
So, your boyfriend, the dog, that other cat with the long blonde hair?
Yeah, and her.
And y'all, would you canoe over there? Okay.
And she was fine.
Y'all went to y'all slept in the tent, all of you together, 4 of you?
No, us 2 slept in the tent. Her and Chris slept in the, like a hammock.
Yeah. And which
he
one's
said
Chris?
when he woke up, blonde hair.
The guy that was wearing like the Bieber hair, swishy blonde.
Probably.
Your
yeah.
boyfriend's got the longer hair, right?
Yeah, you saw me with him.
Okay.
The fully tatted guy's Chris.
Yeah.
Skinnier,
Yeah.
fully tatted.
Tall.
Chris.
Okay.
Yeah, it was.
So
us
him and
four,
her slept in a what?
a hammock, and he said.
Oh, okay.
I woke up and I woke him up and I said, "Where's Lauren?" And he said, "She got up a while ago." He was like, "But I didn't feel her or anything, but she had gotten up." And I said, "Okay, have you seen her since?" And he said, "No." And I asked how long. He said he wasn't sure because we'd been drinking obviously, so we were laying in our hammocks and tents and stuff. And
Did you guys go to a houseboat after, or go to walk the dock, or do anything after you left the bar?
when we left the bar, when you last saw her, we walked all the way down, got in the canoe, and went up there.
Okay.
And she was fine when we went. I know she probably went to pee, but she didn't have her shoes, she didn't have her keys, wallet, phone, and she would not leave without that stuff, you know?
Yeah.
I know, I've known her since I was 10. I know she wouldn't leave without that.
Okay. All right.
So what do you think? Does Hannah sound, as Officer Yarchuk put it, quote, extremely flustered but not devastated? Take a listen to Hannah's official written statement. Last night we were at Pates Ford Marina. We got in the canoe to go home, in parentheses, the cliff. We got to the top and we all went to lay down for bed. Me and Aaron were in the tent. Lauren and Chris were in the hammocks. When we woke up this morning, Lauren was gone, but all of her stuff was still at the campsite. We thought she might be at Wakefest, but she wasn't there. We immediately went to the campsite when coming back to the dock. She wasn't there still, but her stuff was. I went to see if she might have been at the Pates Ford bar, and I saw that policemen were headed to our campsite area. So she's saying, too, that she got up, she didn't know where Lauren went, and that they even thought she might be at the bar, but they saw police coming to the campsite, and that's why they didn't go and check the bar. However, after waking up and realizing that Lauren wasn't there, and the suspicious circumstances of all of her belongings being left behind, the group of friends never went to get help. They never went to go find this ex-boyfriend or find a friend or go to the bar. In fact, they never went to go get help. Instead, they continued to go to Wakefest and say, we thought she maybe went to Wakefest and we didn't see her there. So if you're on a cliff that high, and if your friend is missing in the morning and leaves behind her cell phone and her belongings, especially like her shoes, wouldn't you immediately go into panic mode looking for your friend, trying to make sure that everything was okay, not just go to Wakefest and to go party? Chris told police, "It almost feels like I'm a suspect right now, and I know you guys are just doing your job." So Chris seemed to be highly sensitive and on high alert here. He was already kind of spilling his story. Then he was saying he wanted to get off the boat. Now he's saying, "I feel like I'm a suspect, but I get it. You're just doing your job." Seems like something's eating at Chris a little bit. Now, I gotta just say, there was something that really rubbed me the wrong way about this back then, and still all this time later. And I think it's for good reason, because come to find out, this can actually be a way of disassociating and distancing yourself from the crime. Psychologists call this linguistic distancing, or depersonalization, basically. When someone uses a detached label instead of a name, it can be a subconscious way to put space between themselves and the victim, all in an effort to reduce the psychological effects that it has on them, and the psychological ownership of what's happened. Research in investigative psychology has shown that this kind of distancing language often shows up when people are trying to minimize their connection to a crime. And there have been plenty of suspects who have later been proven guilty, like, Chris Watts, Scott Peterson, who did depersonalize from their victims by referring to them in vague, generic terms rather than directly by name. Now, speaking in this way isn't definitive evidence of somebody's guilt, obviously. Some people naturally talk vaguely when they're nervous or when they're under pressure from authority or an intense situation. But here's why it really stands out in Chris's case. He had just been with Lauren. He knew her name. He knew who she was. He even told the police that they had sex the night before. So the fact that he repeatedly chose to call her the girl instead of Lauren, or even my friend, it raises a giant red flag that I cannot move past. So all of the friends at one point or another try to make it a point really about the ex-boyfriend being there, whether they're trying to make that the reason as to why Lauren may have wandered off, or if they're trying to loop the ex-boyfriend in as though maybe he has some responsibility in what happened. They really are trying to make a point of this. And this ex-boyfriend who was there did have a new girlfriend, and although there apparently were a couple tense moments or two between the exchanges, reportedly it never went any further than that. And there was nothing to suggest that he had done anything to Lauren or that he had anything to do with what happened. Lauren's mom and stepdad immediately went to the hospital after an officer had showed up at the house to let them know that there had been an accident. Once they arrived at the hospital, the officers let them know that Lauren unfortunately didn't make it and that it was believed to be an accidental cliff jumping accident. An autopsy report suggested that Lauren must have slipped off the cliff from that campsite and fallen into the water. The report also noted blunt force trauma at the head that was consistent with a fall and possible drowning. However, Lauren's mom, Sherry, did not seem to think that this was possible. She didn't think it was likely and said that this is nothing that Lauren would have ever done. She wouldn't have ever gotten so drunk that she would slip off a cliff or even try to cliff jump like people were suggesting, saying that people often jump from the cliff into the water and she must have just jumped and hit her head. She was saying that this doesn't make sense, and so she decided to do some investigating of her own. The following week, Lauren's mom began asking for friends and different people if they had any photos or videos of people cliff jumping from this cliff, and nobody had any. Nobody had any footage, any photos of people doing this because apparently it just wasn't a thing. Or was it? See, when I first dug into this case, I didn't question this all too much, okay? I also didn't know anyone in Tennessee to really confirm whether cliff jumping at Center Hill Lake was actually a thing. Was it popular? And if so, did people usually just not take pictures or videos of it? Well, it turns out I now know somebody, one of my producers to be exact, who actually lived in Tennessee between 2010 and 2020 and would go out to Center Hill Lake with friends all the time and go cliff jumping. According to her, it was a huge activity, and the whole point was to get photos and videos because it looked cool. Which, if you're watching on YouTube, I'll put some of hers on the screen here just so that you can see. But as you can see, those cliffs are steep and they are rocky. Nobody's disputing that. Now, this wasn't the exact cliff where Lauren and her friends camped, but still, you can see how intense those cliffs were, especially for jumping off. So while Lauren's mom couldn't find evidence of people jumping from that particular spot, it does seem like cliff jumping at Center Hill Lake was popular, especially around Wakefest. But honestly, the idea that none of Lauren's group would have taken photos or videos if they had actually been doing that, I don't know. It feels a little hard to believe. And in those written police reports, there was also no mention of any cliff jumping, no cliff jumping activity whatsoever. So it's still unknown where that officer at the hospital and the autopsy report got the cliff jumping suggestion, perhaps one of the friends, or was that just the conclusion that they reached based on the circumstantial evidence that they had at the time. After Wakefest was over, and it was the same night that Lauren's body was found, Chris posted on Instagram, and he posted a photo of him, Hannah, and Aaron, the three of them, without Lauren, and he captioned this, "Best weekend ever," and then he later changed the caption to, "Wakefest 2015 went pretty good this year, met some new friends that made it awesome." First of all, why would this be the best weekend ever, first of all, when your friend and somebody who you admittedly slept with was found dead just that morning? A friend who you were sleeping in a hammock with, a friend that you reportedly slept with, and now you're posting on Instagram that it was the best weekend ever? That's a huge red flag. Also, just on like a level of being another human being, somebody who you were just with died and you're posting on Instagram, period. It's just so insensitive and, again, just such a red flag. Who does that? Like, what is with this guy? Wouldn't that be one of the worst weekends of your life? Or even if you're not going to post that it was the worst weekend of your life, don't post at all. But the fact that you're posting a picture of the three of you without Lauren saying the best weekend ever and met some great friends, it just screams red flag to me. And let me just pop in here to connect this back to the whole cliff jumping question. In that Instagram post, Chris is literally holding a selfie stick. So clearly, he wasn't shy about capturing moments from the weekend. Yet somehow, you're telling me not a single photo or video of cliff jumping exists from their entire group. That feels strange, and I don't know if I buy it. But as if that wasn't enough of a red flag, there's more. All three of the friends decided not to show up to Lauren's funeral. And that got Lauren's mom, Sherry, questioning what really happened. Why is this childhood friend Hannah not at my daughter's funeral? Why are these other people who she was with that weekend not at her funeral? What's really going on here? Officer Melanson called Lauren's mom after the funeral, and he told her that he did not feel Lauren's death was accidental, although he didn't have any proof indicating otherwise. A few months later, the DeKalb County Police Office closed the case, and a medical examiner ruled Lauren's death as accidental. And the report says that Lauren fell from a cliff, landed on the rocks, and then rolled into the lake. Sherry was given Lauren's belongings back, but a couple key items were missing from her belongings. Her sleeping bag was missing, and pieces of her clothing were missing. So none of this was sitting right with Lauren's mom, Sherry. I want to pause here for a moment because this is really where Lauren's case begins to shift. And it's all because Sherry doesn't just sit on the sidelines. If the system wasn't going to get to the bottom of what really happened, Sherry decided that she would. She would not rest until there was justice for Lauren. So in February of 2016, she hires a private investigator. And that, of course, is none other than Sheila Wysocki, who we've been referring to on and off throughout the episode. And yeah, something I haven't mentioned until now is that Sheila didn't just take, a keen interest in digging into Lauren's case, but since 2016, she has poured countless hours into the case, determined to uncover the answers that the investigators never could. And some more background on Sheila, because I think it is worth noting, she's not just known for being a PI, but she's also known for solving the murder of a friend when the police weren't able to 26 years after the fact. And that's the heartbreaking case of Angela Samoda, who was Sheila's friend and also her former college roommate back in 1984. So all of this to say, by the time that Sheila partners up with Lauren's mom, Sherry, this is not her first rodeo. She's a renowned PI, and to this day, Sheila is a very fierce advocate for justice who dedicates her life and time to helping loved ones get answers. So I simply could not revisit this episode without having connected with Sheila. And spoiler alert, I had more than just one or two questions for her. Like, what were her initial thoughts on Lauren's case when Sherry reached out? And here's what she had to say.
I happened to be out of town at the time. I was also working on another case at the time, and I said I would look at it and let her know. And then I spoke to Sherry, told her to send all the documents. After that, I told Sherry she's got a good case. She probably would do well with an investigator. My response regarding all cases is you don't know what you don't know. Unless you get into them, you don't know if the family is looking at things differently and the police did their job. You have to actually go through and do your own investigation. So at the beginning, it appeared that there were problems in the investigation. Once I dove into it, clearly the police did not do their job. So that's how I always do it. And I never disregard what a family says, but I never take it as gospel.
Sheila said one of the first things she noticed about Lauren's case had to do with her autopsy photos. In those images, something caught her eye that she just could not let go of. She notices the hemorrhaging around Lauren's neck. Now, you do not get this kind of hemorrhaging with a fall. Something had to have been put around Lauren's neck to get those marks. There was also a possible bite mark on Lauren's chest. And Sheila also noted that there was no water in Lauren's lungs to support this theory of her possibly drowning after she rolled into the lake, after falling off this cliff. Now, while dry drowning can sometimes happen, it's very unlikely in this scenario. There was also a very odd triangle impression on the front of Lauren's body. And in this photo, you can see that there is a perfect V and a handle. And Officer Yarchuk had said that anyone who has ever been in a canoe will recognize that this is the canoe's bow or stern, as if someone had laid Lauren's body on a canoe after she was dead, because then lividity sets in and the blood starts to pool and it leaves a marking like that. It's a perfect imprint captured on film, and it's indisputable in my mind. It is a key piece of evidence in this case. Now, if that's true, and if she has a mark on her from where the blood pooled from when she was laid post-mortem on a canoe, that means she most likely, and again, this is just in my opinion, she most likely would have had to have been killed up at the campsite on the cliff and then moved into the canoe, taken out to the cove, and dropped her body off in the water. And then they come back, because as though they were trying to plant a scene that she fell off the cliff and rolled into the water on her own. Because there's not much other explanation as to how you would get a marking like that on your body post-mortem, unless, again, her body was laid on a canoe. Of course, I needed to hear from Sheila firsthand what she thought about all of this. And here's what she had to say.
I think a medical examiner's job is to be separate from the police. Unfortunately, I think they're so biased, and then they are part of the problem in working with the police. Whatever the police tell them is what they write down. That is the system throughout the country. So as in this case, I believe the medical examiner was told one thing, wrote it down. It's very clear and on the record that that happens all the time. And that was the end of the case. There are problems in Lauren's case. For instance, the fact that in the state of Tennessee, we don't automatically do kits on unattended females, which is unacceptable and should be a crime that's not done. The medical examiner should have done a deeper dive and let Lauren's body tell the evidence. For instance, the features on her body are not consistent with the fall. It's very clear. You don't have to be a police officer to look at that. You don't have to be a medical examiner. A average person can look at it and go, she didn't fall off that cliff. It is obscene that people are trying to promote that. Yes, there's evidence that are contradicting what has been put on the record.
If Lauren truly fell off a cliff while wearing her clothes, but her little hot pink shorts and her black top, wouldn't there be major scratches and marks all over her body? Wouldn't she have cuts and bruises, blunt force trauma to the head, all of these things that are indicative of a fall down a 30-foot or 90-foot cliff? Wouldn't there also be tons of blood everywhere? Wouldn't her clothing have been ripped from the fall down? But in fact, there were very few marks on Lauren's body. The clothing wasn't ripped. It does not appear as though she's injured from a fall. So these injuries don't match up with a 30 or 90-foot cliff fall. So it doesn't make a lot of sense, and it's not adding up. And why wasn't this called out by the original medical examiner? The private investigator, Sheila, was able to get in contact with Officer Yarchuk, who was also the security guard that evening at the bar when he saw Lauren leaving with her friends at 2 a.m. And as I mentioned, he does not think Lauren's death was an accident. This was yet another thing that really stood out to me. So I asked Sheila what her reaction was when she first heard that, and whether she knows where he stands on this case today.
Chris Yarchuk is one of the heroes in this case. That is the police officer you want showing up at a crime scene. Chris knew what he was looking for. He knew what the evidence stated, and he was very accurate. He stands exactly where he stood 10 years ago.
The police that handled Lauren's case severely mishandled the evidence. They failed to secure the crime scene immediately, and they also didn't do any sort of essay kit on Lauren. Now, if there's a 21-year-old who mysteriously goes missing and then turns up dead face down in the water after sharing a hammock with a guy that she barely knew who admitted to having sex with her, he's also a few years older than her, wouldn't one of the most important things be to not only rule those people out as a suspect, but to also make sure that there was no essay that took place? And remember how Chris made it a point to tell the officers that he had sex with Lauren? Which later Hannah had said that Lauren would not have had sex with Chris because she had that boyfriend, Chase, who was waiting for her at home and who they were going to go to that party together with the next night. Honestly, I still think this is one of the most disturbing aspects of the entire case. The fact that Chris admitted to having sex with Lauren, yet no essay exam was ever performed. So I asked Sheila what she thought about this and why the investigators wouldn't have done it.
He told an off-duty police officer that he had had sex with Lauren after the off-duty police officer said, "We will do a kit," which is logical and normal, you would think, except for in the state of Tennessee and Texas and a few other places. So it's consistent across the country. But what it tells me, I have a very strong opinion about no kits and them not being processed. We see over and over cases are resolved once you do kits, and other cases are tied to it. If they had done that, that would have told whether or not Chris was telling the truth and had sex with her, or if someone else had sex with her, if she had been sexually assaulted. And the fact that a police officer who was the detective, Jeremy Taylor, on the record said she had her period, and that's why they didn't do a rape kit, makes you wonder the quality and mental state of the men involved in the judicial system and the criminal justice system.
So all of this is also a big red flag. You have him saying he had sex with her friends saying that would never happen. You have no essay kit taking place. It's just, again, very mishandled from the get-go. And when the officers were talking to the friends, they didn't keep the three friends separate. They let them all be there together, not only to corroborate their stories, but to hear each other's versions of events and play off of each other, not isolate them from one another to hear what one has to say to see if there's any discrepancies. They let all three of the friends stay together the entire time. And the 911 call was lost. How does a 911 call get lost? I mean, it is just a complete trash dumpster fire from the get-go here. So Sheila, the PI, decides she's going to conduct some of her own experiments because she wants to get to the bottom of this and figure out how Lauren would have gotten from the bottom of this cliff all the way into that secluded cove. Could she have really floated all of that way? And to everybody's surprise, or I should say not surprise, none of it added up. No matter how the dummy was thrown, flipped, or fell, it would never have hit the water, and it would never have been able to then roll into the water. Sheila also had done experiments to test the current of the water to figure out how Lauren would have floated into that other cove. And those experiments are showing that her body couldn't have ever floated there. It never could have gotten to that location. So how did Lauren get to that cove? Could it have been a canoe? Could somebody have canoed Lauren's body into that cove and then rolled it off the canoe face down into the water? I asked Sheila what she thought about this theory and whether the canoe was ever even tested.
Do I believe she was moved to her location? Yes. Do I believe that the currents took her? No. Did they check the canoe or investigate anything? Anything. They did not investigate anything. So no. And they don't want to.
Shortly after Lauren's death, Hannah and her boyfriend Aaron moved to Florida. So Sheila, being the great PI that she is, decides she's going to fly to Florida and she's going to meet with Hannah because she wants to discuss her version of events and revisit what happened that day. Hannah explains to Sheila that she didn't go to seek help to go find Lauren because after she spoke with Chris and Aaron, she assumed that Lauren would just find her way back, that she had wandered off, and that it was fine. However, during that meeting with Sheila, Hannah's phone went off, and it was Aaron who was calling her. And Sheila says that she could hear Aaron's voice on the other line telling Hannah, instructing Hannah to stick to the story. What story were they sticking to? When Aaron got home, he walked straight through that room where Sheila was interviewing Hannah, went right into the back room, and did not say a single word. He then came back into the room with a friend, but he says that he did not want to be recorded. He starts questioning Sheila as to why she's there, what she wanted, and Sheila tells him, I just want the truth for Lauren's family. I want justice for Lauren. Aaron tells her that he talked with one of the detectives, Detective Jeremy Taylor, numerous times, and that they had all even agreed to give a polygraph, and then that the detective had said that it wasn't necessary. So he says, we talked to the detective, we offered a polygraph test, he said it wasn't necessary, so now why are you here? What are you trying to figure out? So then Hannah chimes in, and Hannah says they only want answers, so I'm going to be honest. But no real admission or guilt or anything is stated.
First of all, as an investigator, I'm not there to get you. I'm not there to create or make up anything. I just want the truth. That's all I was there for. When Aaron showed up, I was with another investigator, and she and I both agreed it was time to get out of there. He walked in hot. And again, I'm not there to get you. I'm there to get the truth. Talk to me. Just tell me what happened. I go and talk to so many people that tell me their side of the story. Just tell me your side of the story. And if you want me to leave, I'll leave. I'm not there to cause a problem. I'm there to find out what happened. And I believe Sherry Smith deserves the right to know what happened to her daughter when she passed away, whatever it looks like.
With Sheila's work and help, alongside the help of an attorney named Alex Little, Sherry, Lauren's mom, was able to file a wrongful death lawsuit, and she filed a $10 million lawsuit on behalf of her daughter, Lauren. She filed this lawsuit in July of 2016, and she filed it not in hopes of getting that money and getting a single penny of that $10 million, but she filed it in hopes of getting those 3 people to start talking. She was hopeful that this would be the pressure that they needed to start speaking up and share what happened, but it did the actual opposite, and they all decided to just plead the fifth. All 3 of them refused to give any information. In fact, during one of those hearings, Hannah refused to answer direct questions, including, did you choke, strangle, or otherwise put your hands around Lauren's neck or throat between the nights of July 24th, that evening that you were together, or the time of her death? Also asking, did you intentionally or accidentally kill Lauren? A total of 154 questions, all to which Hannah refused to answer. Now, those are not hard questions or difficult questions to answer if you are an innocent person. But to not answer 154 questions of that nature, to me, throws up a red flag. And if you're wondering, yes, I still feel the exact same way about this today. Red flag after red flag. In 2017, Hannah ended up filing a summary judgment, and it was granted. A judge ruled that there was not enough evidence for this wrongful death suit against Hannah. However, it was still pending against the 2 boys. She was then removed ultimately as a defendant from the lawsuit. However, this didn't sit right with Sherry, so she filed an appeal. Now, since that ruling, a witness has come forward, an additional witness that hadn't spoken out previously, and this witness's name is Chris Brown, and he came forward with additional information that might be really important in this case. Chris testified that on the night/early morning of Lauren's death, he and his family had traveled to that same bar and dock center off that lake with some friends. He said that he was standing on the dock, and it was around midnight when he observed a white man swimming towards the dock and eventually climbing out of the water onto the dock. Chris says that the young man appeared extremely distraught and worn out. He apparently spit out water for several minutes before telling Chris and his family that he had almost drowned while trying to swim and search for his friend. Now, Chris said at the time he didn't think much of the incident until he then learned about Lauren's death later that day. He said he simply had a gut feeling that the young man that he saw might have had something to do with it and may have been involved. Well, months later, Chris was discussing Lauren's death with his hairdresser when he was shown some pictures of the group of the 4 friends, and he immediately says, that's Aaron. He points out Hannah's boyfriend Aaron as the person he saw that night swimming up to the dock, being distraught, spitting out water, saying he had been trying to swim to search for one of his friends. So if it were Aaron, why was Aaron swimming in the middle of the night, especially when he said that he was sleeping this whole time? What friend was he searching for? I thought he had no idea where Lauren went. What really happened? Could he have been swimming back from a canoe after dropping Lauren off in the cove, after planting evidence and staging a scene? Could that be why he was swimming back to the dock in the middle of the night and why he was distraught? In February 2019, it was announced that the Tennessee Court of Appeals remanded the summary judgment. So this put Hannah back on that defendant list. It put her right back in that lawsuit, right back in that defendant list. And a panel of 3 judges in the appeals court unanimously agreed that that initial judge in the case who had decided to let her get out of this lawsuit had made the wrong decision. However, in an interesting turn of events, in February of 2020, Lauren's mom, Sherry, announced that she was dropping the lawsuit. And the reason why is she says that she believes the podcast that has been created by the private investigator Sheila, and it's called Without Warning, she thinks that that podcast will do more good than this lawsuit will. She says it's clear that the 3 friends aren't willing to speak out at all, but that for her, she just wants to get Lauren's story out there, and that this podcast probably is the best method to do that. She's hopeful that it might bring justice and might bring somebody who saw something that night or heard something during those days or has heard something from the friends since then. She's hopeful it might bring somebody forward. Because remember, we do know Chris loves to talk quite a bit, so perhaps he gloated or perhaps he confided in somebody along the way over the last few years, and maybe new tips will start to emerge. That decision really shows the power of bringing a case like this into the public eye. Sometimes it isn't the courtroom that pushes things forward. It's people hearing the story, remembering something, or realizing that they have a piece of information that matters. So I asked Sheila if her podcast has done just that, if it's led to new tips, updates, or leads over the years.
I released Without Warning in order to further the case, and that's exactly what it did. It also shined a light on the system itself. So it educated people and also helped move the case forward. Everything that has happened in that case pretty much is public. Anything that we're holding back is for later.
Here's Sheila talking with Sherry, Lauren's mom, about how Lauren's death has affected her and her family.
It's like she died yesterday. We spent those 4.5 years researching, trying to talk to people, trying to find out what happened to her. We even filed the wrongful death lawsuit to try to get information so we could find out what happened to Lauren. We are at a point right now that we have decided that to pursue the lawsuit in DeKalb County would be a moot point. We're not going to get anywhere in that county at all. So we have decided to drop the lawsuit. But I think our time is better used helping other families and making sure that this doesn't happen again.
Back in 2021, a friend of Lauren's revisited the site of that fateful day, and she recounts what it was like for her and what really happened.
So it's been a little over 5 years since I've been back to this actual marina. It's kind of weird, just the fact that I had a friend that passed away here, and that whole weekend was just not something I'd ever want to relive. About right here is where we can climb up to the campsite. The theory that is going right now, she woke up in the middle of the night, she fell out of the hammock going to the bathroom, and she stumbled into the water. You can't fall out of this hammock unless the ropes break.
To demonstrate, Cassie brought a hammock similar to the one from that weekend.
And this is your hammock. You just get in. And you're in. Another thing is the marina's right there. You're telling me that no one was awake or no one heard a scream, a yell, a splash? There's no way. I mean, look how many houseboats are out here right now. Just imagine Wakefest. There's twice as many boats here.
To this day, nearly a decade after Lauren's death, no arrests have been made. Hannah, Aaron, and Chris are living their lives as if nothing ever happened. And it's worth asking, where are they now? I know a lot of you want to know what happened to Aaron, Hannah, and Chris after all of this. So I asked Sheila to share what she knows.
Aaron has been in an accident. When we were going to trial, there was a date we all showed up for court, and his attorney said that he had been in a motorcycle accident and he was paralyzed. At that point, they did not know if he was going to make it. From what I understand, he is still paralyzed, and he is married to Hannah. They have a child, and Chris has had a child. So everybody's moved on.
But where's the justice for Lauren? Do you think that this was an accident? Do you think that perhaps Lauren was just drinking too much that night at the bar and then she fell off the cliff and this is really what happened? Or do you think that it was a murder that was covered up by this cliff and an accidental fall and drowning? Because remember, those marks from the canoe, post-mortem, guys, how did Lauren get those unless she fell off this cliff and rolled off these rocks, rolled into the water, onto a canoe that was docked, landed perfectly on the bow or the stern of the canoe. Then the canoe takes her out to a secluded cove. Then she rolls, after she's already dead, she rolls off that canoe face first into the water. How else could you explain that marking? Seems a lot more plausible to me, at least, that that didn't happen and that somebody killed Lauren at the campsite, went to go dispose of her body, put her on a canoe, and paddled her out to the cove. But what do you think? Let me know in the comments below. And most importantly, if you have any information about Lauren Agee's death in July of 2015, anything you saw, heard, or know about what happened to Lauren, or even about Chris, Hannah, or Aaron and the things that they've said, please reach out directly to Sheila. We will drop her contact information in the show notes below for this episode. She is still actively working this case and reviewing every tip that comes in because, unfortunately, to this day, no one has been held accountable for Lauren's death. And as you've heard, there is so much in this case that suggests that this was not accidental. In the meantime, sharing Lauren's story is one of the most powerful things that we can do. So please make sure that you're subscribed, give this video a thumbs up, and please help push this story out to as many people as possible. The more awareness, the more chances we have of getting answers and ultimately justice for Lauren. And if you'd like to go even deeper, definitely check out Without Warning, where Sheila takes you step by step through her investigation into Lauren's case. I'll have that linked in the show notes. I'm Annie Elise, and again, thanks for listening, and as always, stay safe.